things like that that are a little outdated now. If I get those updated and get those on the website, would that be helpful?
The ones that you would be putting out on the website, what was the duration of the time that you have when you use those particular presentations? An hour or 2 hours?
I try to time, the one I've been using most recently, I'm usually given an hour. And so I try to talk for 45 minutes and then have a question and answer period, because the questions and answers can go on longer than at least 15 minutes, if not longer. Although I do have one that's like an hour and a half long, where I go in more in depth on things. And I guess I'm torn either way as to which way is better, because I've had people take both, and they're caching. So I guess the end goal I've accomplished, they're all geocaching. And pretty much I can flip through the slides. This is the one that I used at West Bend. I haven't changed it at all yet. And I used it at Jamboree last year. But people like the definitions. People like hearing that it's in how many other countries, because then I start hearing about people's vacation plans. It's really cool. It's like, wow, do you know how many caches are in that city? I am asked about other websites, and it's another one of those, probably from my Red Cross background. I always tell them I use the geocaching website. Yes, there's some other websites out there. I'm asked who goes geocaching a lot. I try to be very encouraging, because I've had people in my classes of all age levels, ability levels. The whole idea of the names. And then this is where I get into logging in, creating an account. And my screenshots are a little bit old. The cutting, the coloring is all wrong. But at least it gets them the idea. People get really nervous about how much information they have to give. I hear that quite frequently. But when they hear that it's just a name and email address, and I said, you can make up the name, and you can go on Gmail and create an email account, then they're not quite so nervous about it.
Here's my question. Is it possible that you can't have conflicting geocache names? There's only one?
Right, there's only one person with that name. And I do stress how you have to validate your account, because I think a lot of new people don't realize that, and then they're locked out of features on the site until they validate it. This is the shorter version, so I just talk about there being the satellites. I don't go into how they work. And then I talk real basic about coordinates, kind of being the address. Because a lot of people have GPS receivers in their car, and they're used to punching in street addresses. So when I talk about coordinates being like street addresses, it's just like the lights go on. We talk about cache. And believe it or not, this is another place where the light bulbs go off. You're laughing. When we say cache, when I pull out that first container, it's like, oh, okay, that's what you're talking about. So I try to bring that up really early on, because it's one of those words I kept using over and over, and people be like, what? They don't think that that's the
You're looking for money?
Yeah. Or they think they're these big prizes or something. I do emphasize the log sheet. This is where I need to tweak it a little bit. The different types of caches. I do recognize, some of them are grandfathered, some of them are discontinued, just so people, like if you go to my profile, you're going to see the location list. Well, what was that? It's discontinued, but it's still out there. This is where I get into types of containers. This is when we start handing out the little containers, the nanos, and just their eyes get really, then you show the ammo cans, and they're like really like, oh, okay. The kids though think the nanos are cool. Then you pull out something that's a really creative hide, like the rocks. Or I had the fence post ones for a while, and I had the rebar one. Then just kind of lose a few people because they're like, are they all gonna be like this? And it's like, no. I try to emphasize the terrain and difficulty rating to try and steer them towards easier caches, because otherwise they don't realize it and they go after the hard ones and they can't find them. And then I do go through the website again where I talk about state, zip code, waypoint, what a page is supposed to look like. Look, it looks pretty decent on this screen. So they have a concept of what they're looking for, what a page, what fits on the page and how it can help them. Travel bugs. I have a funny story with travel bugs because I know the cacher started before I did, who had no idea what they were, and he collected them for over a year. Went to his first event and found out what they really were. He had made quite a few. Cool fall, all of a sudden these travel bugs came out. So I learned from that experience that I need to tell people up front what they are. And I think my next one is the geocoin, because that's another one of those things where people think they're supposed to collect it. So I try to get that, instill the idea that they're supposed to travel. And this is where one of my oops is in my presentation, a newer feature. It's been new for about 2 years now, but people don't catch it unless you're a geocacher. You probably didn't catch it till I said it, right? But the discover it versus the log it, the retrieving. Because before you had to retrieve them and drop them, you couldn't do that discover thing. This is where I talk about different GPS receivers, what to look for. And on this one, are there any that are even black and white out there anymore? I don't think there are any more black and whiters out there, but yeah. That's another spot where I think I need to update this a little bit, just to give people an idea. And then you start talking about all these features and their eyes get really big, because it's like, oh my goodness, all that to think about. But I always emphasize, make sure it's downloadable. You may not know how it works, but you'll figure it out eventually. And I'm not sure all GPS receivers have this screen, obviously, as they used to, about how they pick up the satellites. So I'm thinking I might take this one out and come up with something else for accuracy. I just like using this one because it gave them the idea of where the satellites were picking up and how many satellites were locking in for the accuracy piece. Yours still has it? Cool. I know I can find it online, but it doesn't come up on the screen anymore. When I first wrote this presentation, that was like the first thing that came up on the screen. And then the pointer, using the compass versus using the map. That gets to interesting discussions. And then where to find them. Going out and finding the first ones. What do you do when you find it? The trading thing. And when I do the temp caches, especially if I know I've got families or kids, I like to put stuff in them. And I've done it where I've always told the kids they can take stuff from mine today, but on the real caches you can't. Because it kind of gives them a mixed message, and so I'm kind of torn with that. You know, and what we did at Pike Lake is, if they came back with their card stamped, then they got a prize from us. And I think I like that as being a better recommendation. Stephanie, you work with kids. You know what I'm saying? If they can go to caches at the event, what makes them different from caches at a park? So if they can take the stuff out of the caches here and not trade, but yet when I go to a park, it gives kids the wrong message. So I'm thinking I like the idea of using the stamps in the temporaries, and then they get a prize for finding all of them. Might be how I write it.
You know, it just seems like you need to talk about smartphones, because that's all I use now.
Okay.
And I just think that more people might have access to that than if they had to buy.
Sure. Sure.
I know so many kids that have smartphones, more than their parents. The parents are walking around with the small ones.
Right, exactly. So I guess right when I'm talking about different types of GPS receivers, should I update that to talk about the smartphone piece right there?
Cheap apps and add it onto a smartphone.
What's the more popular app right now? I'm still in CGO and then the geocaching app. I use both of them. I have pros and cons for both, so depending upon where I'm at, that's what I use.
I use Geosphere most.
Geosphere.
Geosphere.
Okay. So if I would update this outline to have that piece, would that be helpful?
do a 101 for like younger kids.
Sure.
But I would say at the very least, 75% had smartphones on them. And we're talking middle schoolers
Heck yeah.
and high schoolers.
My day camp group, they all did.
And,
Although they're not allowed to have them at camp. So when their leader, because it's after their overnight, the leader kind of uses the time to put stuff away before they leave for the day. The phones all come out because I know they're safe with me. They can admit they have them because I'm not going to bust them. Because they're not supposed to have their phones at camp. But they just had an overnight, so they all have them because their parents want them to have them. And so for me, I'm like, it's okay as long as Daddy's not here. When you see Daddy, okay, quick, throw them in my bag, kind of thing, so that I have them and not you. So I know exactly what you're saying with the middle schoolers.
I guess with the
Yeah, but you know what? But it should kind of be in my presentation, acknowledging it, because at Pike Lake, the couple that I worked with pulled out the iPhone. And we got them to download they actually downloaded and paid for the geocaching app right there. No second thought. Because the sign on the website's free. If it's only $10 for the website, or for the app, we'll do it, and they did it right then and there. So this is helpful for me. I hope it's helpful for you. But I'm still thinking towards the stamps and turning in for a prize versus the taking stuff. Oh, it's fun to find stuff in caches. Maybe I could have it that you can go get that cache over there and take something out of it or something. There we go. I do like to talk about what shouldn't be in caches. Still. Because I've had experiences where my and then 11-year-old niece found some inappropriate items in a cache. And having to explain to her not to tell her dad about this. But, so people have an idea that it may not always be appropriate, and don't let send the kids ahead all the time. And then I go back into the page, encouraging that logging, and how their logs give feedback to cache owners, and if they're really struggling, how they can email cache owners for help. Because once they leave that presentation, unless they figured out who I am and how to get a hold of me, who else can they contact? Until they come to their first event, they don't realize there's a whole group of people out there that are willing to help them. So that's kind of my basic one, and then I encourage them to sign in the WGA and say hello in the newbie forum if they need help too. So I try to give them several avenues of here's where you can get assistance. So I guess is it helpful to see a presentation like this? What other applications should I think about though?
Just a side note.
Yes.
There's 2 or 3.
On the WJ website?
Yeah.
They're from 2005, 2006.
It wouldn't take much to update.
Right. And mine is off of a couple other people's. Actually, I took a couple other people's and kind of made it my own at the time. But even mine now needs updating.
I think that when you're talking and you have the link to geocaching.com to show the different ones, I think you should also put some lingo on there or the link on the geocaching page, so then that way
We use so many terms.
talking about, because otherwise a new cacher, we started out friends in a different state and they called us up and been like, what does this mean? And we have to call them back or text.
You gotta be really careful when you're talking because we have our own language. And I think, I don't know, I didn't point it out, but in the Girl Scout one, I taught them the word hootie because I told them when they were going around camp, I want you to holler, find it, and see what all the other girls do. Then I want you to, when you go to the next cache, call hootie and see what the other girls do. Because we geocache around other groups. When